welcome to the Audible, the quarterback analysis podcast for Week 16. I'm Big Italy 42, here talking about some top plays for quarterbacks and GPPs and cash games, courtesy of, as always, as Zach Scott Moxie on Twitter. Your top elite cash game play. Hopefully you've been paying attention. You obviously know this one by now. He's been on an absolute tear. Was last week the first quarterback ever with 5 touchdowns and 100 yards in a game, and 5 touchdowns. Now facing a team that the Panthers dominated a few weeks ago, 38-0. Cam Newton, of course, expensive, $9,300 on FanDuel, $75 on DraftKings, but this is the guy who's having a just ridiculously good season, and you know what you're getting out of him. You're getting yourself a nice floor and huge upside if the game stays close. Vegas doesn't think this one will be particularly close, but nice team total for the Panthers at 27.25. Only need one more win or a Cardinals loss to lock up the number 1 seed, but you imagine they're going to get the win here, and they should. And you almost hope that the Falcons do keep it close, because then we'll get some more production out of Mr. Newton. But either way, he's likely going to win the MVP. He's having a hell of a game. And in that first game, 265 yards and 3 scores on just 21 pass attempts. So it makes a lot of sense to lock him into your lineups. Next up, Ben Roethlisberger facing off against the Ravens. Vegas team total just shy of 29 points here. And 8,900 on FanDuel, 68 on DraftKings, and over his last 6 games, he's thrown for 300 yards in 5 of them, really with the only dud being the game against the Bengals where he didn't throw for any touchdowns, but defensive touchdown. He had a couple of touchdowns from D'Angelo Williams. That was not for lack of offense there. Obviously, Ravens long gone from the playoff race, and Steelers have had some big games against them in the past, but, I mean, this is a depleted team that's just horrible right now. And last time Big Ben played the Ravens in a regular season, obviously that was not this year, but 340 yards and 6 touchdown passes. Certainly not going to do that, but if this one remains even remotely close, you imagine Big Ben should approach 300 yards, a couple scores, and give you some nice upside there as well. Next up, Matt Stafford. Last week in the first half against the Saints looked like Tom Brady. I mean, 12 for 13, 3 touchdowns at one point. The guy has been thriving in the Jim Bob Cooter system recently. 7,600 on FanDuel, 61 on DraftKings. Vegas team total of a healthy 25.5 here, and at least 16 fantasy points in 8 of his last 9 games, and at least 2 touchdown passes in 4 straight. Now facing a 49ers team who have been better recently, but still 26th in passing yards per game, 18th in total points allowed, and allowing over 17.5 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So this is a 49ers defense that's been much better at home. This is on the road, and Stafford certainly finishing this season very strong. So you got to like his potential this week as well. Next up, Alex Smith, 6,800 on FanDuel, 51 on DraftKings. Vegas team total is huge again, 27.5 against the Browns team that is just not good at all. Not a huge upside play, but Alex Smith is a very good game manager. He's one who has not thrown more than 25 passes in 4 of his last 5 games. He's only gone over 250 twice in that frame, but 17 fantasy points per game, at least 1 touchdown in 4 straight. This is a guy that gives you some points on the ground every once in a while. Browns allowing the 5th most points to opposing quarterbacks at 20.19, and 5th most touchdown passes with 29 this season. And while he does not have much upside, of course, he's got him listed as a GP play, not as a GPP play here, as a cash game play. So that's certainly an option that you want to give a look to if you want to just get yourself that high floor without having to pay a huge price tag. Elite GPP play. This is the guy that I've been loving, at least on a fantasy end. As a real life quarterback, he's hard to watch sometimes. But Blake Bortles for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 8,200 FanDuel, 65 on DraftKings. Vegas team total of over 24. At least 23 fantasy points in his last 4 weeks. He's averaging 299.5 passing yards and 2.75 passing scores. He has 2 rushing scores, 93 rushing yards throughout that span as well. And now facing the Saints, you know the old adage by now. I guess it's not that old, but the Saints are horrible on the secondary. They give up a ton of points, and have allowed the most passing touchdown and are very, very close to breaking a record for most touchdown passes ever allowed in a season. So this is not a fluke. This team is just god-awful in the secondary. Blake Bortles and the Jags, not officially eliminated from the playoffs, but getting very close. Obviously, they're going to come out firing, trying to get a big win after a tough loss last week against Atlanta. But Bortles has been putting up big-time numbers, and he's a guy I'll have quite a bit of exposure to as well. Drew Brees on the opposite side. He is dealing with the plantar fascia issue, but With a Vegas team total of nearly 28, Vegas certainly expects him to play there in this one. At least 3 touchdown passes in his past 4 home games. And in that time frame, 378.75 passing yards. Obviously, with Mark Ingram out, this is a guy who is going to be passing first and then passing second and then passing a little bit more. There's not much of a running game there. We saw Tim Hightower have a good game 2 weeks ago, but still just not a consistent attack. You imagine they're going to need to score points as well to keep up with the Jags, who are going to score points on them. The Jags have been susceptible as well. 261 passing yards a game, 25 passing touchdowns on the season. So, like Zach mentioned and I mentioned, he's a guy that isn't 100%, but Drew Brees, he's going to get his no matter what. If he's healthy enough to play, he's going to be out there. Next up, Kirk Cousins as a value play. And since he's on the road and not at home, obviously he gets a little bit of a downgrade. He's played much better at home this season, but 7,500 FanDuel, 55 on DraftKings, 22.5 Vegas total is not high, but facing the Eagles, who are just awful. And last time out on the road, he faced the Bears, 22 fantasy points, but outside of that, no more than 12 in any road game this season. Eagles have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks at over 21 and 3rd most touchdown passes with 30. Cousins, every once in a while, gets you some points in the running game as well. 2nd in rushing touchdowns with quarterbacks with 5. And obviously, the aforementioned struggles on the road, but he does have some upside. And the Redskins all of a sudden have a chance to not only win their division, but get a home playoff game. So this is an enormous game for both sides. Winner of this has the inside track of taking down the putrid NFC East this season. Phillip Rivers last up, 7,600 on FanDuel, 57 on DraftKings. Vegas team total just shy of 21 points. And Rivers had a couple bad games there. His offensive line and his weapons have been dropping like flies, but 311 yards and 3 scores last week, all of them to Danny Woodhead. And he now has over 20 fantasy points for the first time in his last 3 games and the second time in 5 games. But facing off against the Raiders team, who he put up 336 yards and 3 scores on, and the Raiders 28th in passing yards allowed a game. Chargers certainly a little bit more healthy than they were a couple weeks ago, and Rivers and the Chargers look like they want to finish this one strong. Last week, kind of the narrative game, possibly, more likely, probably their last game in San Diego there, and they did finish that game strong. But this is a battle of 2 teams on Christmas Eve. It'll be a fun game to watch because neither team plays very good defense, so at least we'll get some excitement on Christmas Eve in a game that has 0 meaning and 0 bearing for anything but the NFL draft for next year. And, of course, DFS, which is the most important part of this whole scenario here. All right, that'll wrap things up here for us for this week. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.